In his speech at Arlington National Cemetery today, President Trump said, quote, "Our heroes have lived through unthinkable nightmares so we could live the American dream." To commemorate this holiday, we have two veterans joining us tonight. U.S. Navy SEAL veteran Mike Sarraille, he's the Chief Talent Officer at Overwatch Mission Critical. We also have with us U.S. Marine Corps and Army National Guard veteran John Byrnes. He's the Strategic Director at Concerned Veterans for America. Thank you both so much for joining us and for your service. Now, Mike, I hear it's also your birthday, so I'd like to start with you. Happy birthday, and as a veteran, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
We've done a lot of interviews today about Veterans Day, and everyone goes to sacrifice these men and women have made. And that's true. As I said, that is sacred ground. But really, given the current times in the rise in American nationalism and American pride, and we're seeing the recruiting numbers go up, it's about continuity. And what I mean with that is every generation has produced men and women who raise their right hand to serve in the military, this unbroken chain of service through many generations. And so I remember being the young man looking at the World War II, Korean and Vietnam era veterans with just such esteem and wanting to be those men. And now I look at the next generation who's answering the call. And so I'm absolutely positive and optimistic about where we're heading as a nation, and that all it takes is a small minority of good men and women to answer the call and defend our freedoms. And I'm confident that we've got that for a generation to come.
And John, what's your reflection today on what does Veterans Day mean to you?
Well, you mentioned honor and sacrifice. Certainly, veterans are a smaller and smaller cohort every year. It's great that we have a day to celebrate them. Like Mark, I remember being a young man, a school kid, and there were World War II veterans who were scoutmasters and teachers and Little League coaches. And we're losing that connection between the general public and veterans. Again, Mark pointed out kind of the family trade nature of service these days. It's fathers to sons, uncles to nephews. And that's getting smaller and smaller. It's becoming more a part of middle America, flyover country, the bitter clinger class, versus the coastal elites who they're just not encouraging service, and they're not really connected to the things that folks like Mark and I go through sometimes. And Veterans Day is a great place to start, but I wish more of them would spend a little more time thinking about us the rest of the year.
And on that note, Mike, reflecting on what today means, what areas do you think civilians could learn more about to fully understand and appreciate those who serve?
That's a tough task, because naturally, like this esteemed colleague here and myself, we raised our hands so civilians wouldn't have to go over there. And I don't think we want to describe what we went through and what we saw over there during the global war on terror, whatever war you fought in. That's something we try to hold close and sort of shield the American public from. And so we don't want to talk about the traumas of what happened over there, but it's hard to explain unless you have a family member who's in the service of what really it entails to be a service member, to know that you're potentially giving your safety at risk, your life for somebody you don't know. And the time away from family, it wasn't common or uncommon to be away from my family 300 days out of the year. And that's not even if I was deployed. So the sacrifice and time away from my two kids at the time, my wife at the time, the things that you don't get to participate in, the Christmas dinners, the New Year's Eve celebrations, or Thanksgiving because you're gone, deployed overseas or training. It is a hard life. But that said, I wouldn't have traded it for the world, because I was surrounded by men and women, the best of us, who, I watched selfless valor on a nightly basis when deployed. And I would not be the man who I am, nor my peers, if we didn't go through what is the greatest leadership incubator in the world, known as the U.S. military, regardless of what service you're in. It shapes you into a man or woman of character, driven by ethics. And that's why veterans who get out of the military go on to succeed in the private sector, because they know how to lead teams. They know how to lead people. They know how to lead with character and lead through love. And so it's very difficult to explain that to someone who's never served or been close to the military in some way.
And John, there is a sobering stat. In 2022, the VA data says that on average, there were 17 veteran suicides per day. What needs to be done to help our veterans, whether that's boosting mental health, assisting them with assimilating back into civilian life? What needs to be done?
Well, Concerned Veterans for America, the first thing we think is that if veterans are encouraged by the VA, if the VA actually helps assist them get care when and when they need it, instead of trying to force them into U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs facilities, that will drive better outcomes. Again, it comes down to in a big way connection to the civilian world as well. If civilians can connect better to veterans, in history, veterans were part of the community, right? All men went to war in smaller communities. As we got bigger and bigger, we got further and further disconnected from that. So that reconnection that Veterans Day starts with, it needs to happen. Kind of as Mike was highlighting, when you serve, you kind of separate yourself a little bit from one family, but you get a whole new family. And veterans are here for each other. Everyone I served with is like family. Every one of those losses is terrible. And I've lost a few to suicide since the global war on terror started. In fact, over the last almost 25 years now, we've lost almost 4 times as many military and veterans members, just the ones who served in this conflict, to suicide than we did overseas. So a lot more needs to be done. There's a mental health and suicide epidemic, and again, giving the VA the authority and the encouragement to send veterans out into the community would go a long way to helping end that.
And Mike, a 2024 Pew Research poll found that 60% of Americans have a favorable view of the military. Now, the youngest polled 18 to 29-year-olds had the lowest approval, less than half. Now, the Trump administration is working to reshape military culture, and we're seeing it reach enrollment milestones. Is there a relationship between Americans' appreciation of veterans and their attitudes toward the military?
There absolutely is. And that 60% confidence rate was the lowest it's ever been since the Clinton administration. And that was under the Biden administration. We've seen that rise, this rise in nationalism and American pride. Here's what it comes down to. Enlistment was so low during the Biden administration because why would you want to work for a boss who continued to denigrate the American way, our nation, and even denigrate the military in certain ways or through policies by enacting social experience on military culture, which is a clash. Military culture is different than civilian culture for a reason. But we've seen in 2025, the enlistments, in fact, every service exceeded their quota, which I called the Trump and Hegseth bump effect, because you've seen the Secretary of War come in and reestablish standards, accountability, and most importantly, the warrior ethos. We know why we exist, peace through strength. And if called, we will be the most lethal military in the world. And we know we don't want to be called. We're, as we say, in the profession of peace, trained in the art of war. So, we've got a president and a Secretary of War who believe in our troops. And as you hear Pete Hegseth often say, the president and him have the soldiers' backs. They feel that. And that's why I think we will see confidence in our military and enlistments go up.
And John, on that note, in your view, what more can be done to improve Americans' perspectives on the military?
I think, again, days like Veterans Day are a great start. I think seeing the military in action, seeing the military physically fit, seeing the military perform, seeing an administration, and I think this goes to recruiting too, seeing an administration and a Department of War that husbands those resources, that does what Mike just said, that doesn't go out seeking dragons to slay, but is interested only in the wars that we have to fight, something that the president was saying as far back as 2015. That will encourage folks to connect more with the military. The military remains still one of the most respected institutions in the country. It's usually number 1 or 2. The respect is declining, as it is with all institutions, but that's a bigger cultural issue with institutions. The military is still on top of that. I think the new look of the military, the new take of the military, that they're there to provide excellence again. The demand for excellence among the top ranks, 3- and 4-star generals, either you excel or you get out, is something that's long overdue, and I think Americans know it. That there's nothing like seeing generals fail and get promoted to really dishearten the American public about where the military stands.
And Mike, lastly, how has your military service shaped your worldview?
I think the harsh realities of the world. You talk about peace through strength. What does that really mean? When you serve and go to third world countries that are war torn, they respect one thing: and that's strength. I've said it before. Osama bin Laden said, people see a strong horse and they see a weak horse, and they're naturally attracted to the strong horse. There's a reason the Russian-Ukraine war started during the Biden administration. We were a house divided. The military was degrading, and that was Putin's time to move. Had Trump been in office for a second term during that period, that would not have happened. At least that's what I believe. So, we have the best military in the world, technologically, the best fighting man and woman. And that's why I have confidence. And usually, despite whatever president's in office, they're going to get the job done. And that's the beauty. We will always get the mission done, even if it takes us to the last man. And again, I will say this to the youth: go serve. It will be the best of times. And even during the worst of times, you will have smiles on your face because you're surrounded by brothers and sisters in arms. And that is a beautiful thing. You can never replace those moments, and you will feel what true shared adversity is, and you will understand what it's like to truly be part of a tribe.
And John, same question to you. How has your military service shaped your worldview?
Aside from marriage, it's the most transformational event that ever took place in my life. I joined the military a little late. I was already in my 20s. I was, kind of a little bit of wanderlust. That first kind of manifested itself in not wanting to do anything really. But it went a little bit global, and I realized the military was a way to do it. My family has a long history of service in the military and a variety of police departments. I wanted to serve. I wanted my life to mean something. Joining the military was the first step in getting real meaning in my life. And I feel like with Concerned Veterans for America, I'm just carrying that over in a different organization full of veterans. So,
well, John Byrnes, Mike Sarraille, thank you again both for joining us and for your service.
Happy Veterans Day.
Thanks.